When Metaphor ReFantazio first launched, it felt like one of the biggest question marks in Atlas's modern history. This was from, some of the same people that did Persona, and stepping away from that framework that had defined them for years. There was no modern Tokyo, no high school stuff, no seriously rigid calendar structure guiding every single move. Instead, Metaphor introduced some new fantasy stuff built from the ground up around things like political tension, inherited fear, and some belief systems that shape entire societies. So am I looking back at Metaphor 1 year later video that I posted back in October, really just talked about some of the feelings that I had at launch. Some things just didn't grab me right away, but it took a long time for them to settle in and for me to realize what this game was. I mean, obviously, yeah, it's not Persona. It wasn't grounded in everyday routine, and it wasn't immediately relatable in the same way. But a year later, I mean, what really stands out is how intentional that is. Metaphor wasn't trying to replace Persona. It was trying to ask a different kind of question. And maybe, in my opinion, that's why the game has aged so gracefully. I'd like to think that over time, players might come back to it and realize that Metaphor wasn't designed for an instant emotional payoff. It was designed for reflection, for sitting with some uncomfortable ideas and questioning systems bigger than any one character. And that framing really matters because Metaphor doesn't feel like a self-contained story. Its final image, spoilers here, the party boarding the gauntlet runner and leaving the kingdom behind, feels less like closure and more like a statement. The story doesn't just stop, it moves outward. So if you can't tell already, we're talking about Metaphor and what a sequel could look like, whether you want to call it Metaphor ReFantazio 2, Metaphor ReFantazio, whatever. But I tell you what, there's one thing that I absolutely don't want a sequel to, and it's this $20 Walmart chair, and it has absolutely been killing my back, which is another thing I don't want a sequel to. Back pain. So with that being said, we're going to get rid of this old chair. And with that old chair out of the way, I've got a brand new DXRacer Metaphor ReFantazio commemorative chair to open and set up throughout the whole process of the video. By the way, they are the sponsor for today's video, so thank you so much for that. Now, before I'm out of breath anymore, because it was a pretty heavy box to carry upstairs, don't forget to like and subscribe. Leave your thoughts down below. Did you love Metaphor ReFantazio? Would you love a sequel? What kind of things would you love to see? I would love to explore all that and more. So let's get to the video. And yeah, again, chair building throughout. This is going to be a really fun project. So let's talk about what this game actually is. At its core, Metaphor ReFantazio is a story about fear, not as like a personal flaw, but as something that can be governed, really. The world of Uchronia isn't broken because of monsters or ancient gods or anything like that, really. It's broken because fear has become institutionalized. It dictates class, legitimacy, and power, of course. And like this entire political system exists throughout the game, to try and manage it, to suppress it, and eventually weaponize it. And this is where I think Metaphor meaningfully separates itself from something like Persona. While obviously I don't have a whole lot of experience with Persona, from what I know, Persona's conflicts are a little bit more internal, identity, self-acceptance, confronting personal truths. And Metaphor does, have a little bit of that, but it takes those same emotional foundations and really externalizes them. Fear is cultural, anxiety becomes law, and belief becomes infrastructure. So in my 1 year later reflection video that I put out a couple of months ago, I mentioned that this is what gives Metaphor its staying power. It's a game that I still think about even now, a year or so later. It's a game that doesn't immediately comfort you. It observes, it critiques, it lets contradictions exist. And that's why it often hits harder on second thought. Once you're no longer comparing it to what it should have been, what it could have been, and instead engaging with it on its own terms. And the protagonist, Will, in this case, that's who I named him, that's like the canonical name here, reinforces this thematic shift. You're not positioned as like a destined ruler or a savior meant to inherit power. Instead, you're a catalyst. I mean, you're somebody whose entire existence exposes the cracks in a system simply by moving through it. And winning or victory doesn't come from seizing control. It comes from destabilizing certainty. And that's pretty much the main undercurrent of this story, undermining everything that's thought of in this world. And that distinction is really critical because it tells us exactly what Metaphor was not trying to do and what a sequel should avoid repeating. Okay, so let's take a quick pause on the thought behind Metaphor 2 and actually look at this really cool chair. So after carrying these 60+ pound box upstairs by myself, which I would probably recommend if you have somebody to give you a hand, make sure you do that. But I like to just do stuff myself because that's just how I am. I've opened up the box, and the first thing you'll see is this giant sheet of paper which serves as the instructions. And you'll see there's not actually a whole lot to it, which is really good if you're somebody like me who does not like to follow instructions for furniture assembly. Funny story about that, I actually had a furniture assembly job for 2 days, and I hated it so much that I quit. So anytime I put together furniture, I always have that like thought in my head, oh my gosh, I remember when I did that, but you're not watching to hear my personal anecdotes. Anyway, so we'll unbox the chair. Everything looks really cool so far. I have to say that the finish of the chair, this, this leather feel, partnered with the embroidery on there, is a really visually stunning treat. And of course, we got the back support pillow with Gallica, which is a real treat. It looks really cool. And with a chair like this, you would expect to have a headrest, which is going to be very comfortable as well for those longer sessions. Okay, now enough about the chair build and more about Metaphor 2 right now. Metaphor's ending, obviously spoilers ahead, so don't watch any further if you haven't finished the game. After the climax, the game doesn't linger on rebuilding the kingdom or establishing a new order. There's no extended epilogue explaining how everything turned out. Instead, the party leaves and they board the Gauntlet Runner and head into the unknown. That sense of adventure is still there. And obviously that choice feels really deliberate. If Metaphor were a story about governance and reform, then the ending would stay rooted in the kingdom of Uchronia. It would expand maybe a little bit on some of the internal stuff, and that would be that. But it doesn't. I mean, the cast doesn't remain to rule or oversee change. They move on, which implies their purpose was never to maintain the system, even a better one. Their role was to challenge it, and that's what happened. And in hindsight, that ending reframes that whole entire experience. Metaphor isn't about creating the perfect society. It's about proving that societies can be questioned at all. And once that truth is established, staying behind would almost feel like a betrayal of the game's themes. And for a sequel, this is what I would really love to see, is Metaphor wouldn't logistically return to the same political struggle. It would expand outward into new lands, new cultures, new worlds, new belief systems and people. The question wouldn't be, how do we fix this kingdom? Maybe what happens when our beliefs are tested elsewhere. The Gauntlet Runner becomes more than transportation. It becomes a symbol of uncertainty, maybe transition, ideological movement, and a sequel could maybe be built around travel, and that would allow the developers to explore conflict without repeating itself, and that's where the real potential lies. There's a lot of things that reflect the real world now. What happens when you move somewhere else? How are your beliefs tested within another place? I'm an American living in America now, but I've spent the last 10 years in Australia. My wife's Australian, my son's a dual citizen. We'll be going back to Australia at some stage. You know what? This is a story that I live. So that would be cool to explore that within a game form. One of the most important things I think to understand about Metaphor is that I think it's really a thematic experiment. In Metaphor ReFantazio 1, yes, that's right, I'm going to say it, fear is obviously the central force in shaping the world. That focus gives the story weight, but it also places a natural ceiling on how far it can go. A sequel doesn't need to abandon the idea of fear, it needs to maybe complicate it. If Metaphor 1 is about exposing how fear can be weaponized, Metaphor ReFantazio, yes, I'm saying that as well, this could fully explore what happens after that realization. What happens when people understand fear's influence, but still choose systems that rely on it? Or when fear is replaced by something entirely, maybe comfort or tradition, or blind optimism. This is where a series could truly carve out its own identity. Rather than focusing on like emotional awakening or anything else, a sequel could examine emotional fatigue. That's a really strong thing to explore. Societies know that they're flawed, but are too stable, too tired, or too afraid of chaos to change. Think about you. You could be working too much and you're just too busy to exercise or go to the gym, or you're just too tired to stop scrolling your phone. Those little things do add up on a grand scale, and Metaphor 2 could explore that. Now, this shift could also reframe the player's role. You're no longer revealing hidden truths. You're confronting people with truths they already know and have chosen to live with. That's a far more uncomfortable position, and one that I think would fit Metaphor's reflective tone perfectly. Obviously, I've written this script, but the more that I read this, I'm thinking, yeah, this would be pretty cool. But aside from that, it would also allow the sequel to ask a question that the first game largely avoids. And before we ask that hypothetical question, let's see how part 2 of the chair assembly is going so far. Okay, so now that we've unboxed the back part of the chair and the part that you sit on. Continue assembly here with the wheels and the crossbar, whatever that, supports the chair. Everything just goes in really easily. You don't really have to put much pressure on it. And again, for somebody who quit a furniture assembly job after 2 days, this is a real plus. And if you've put together office chairs before, it can be a little bit annoying, but this was fairly straightforward. Just a little bit of pressure, putting things in, you're good to go. And the best part about this assembly was they provide a really rigid screwdriver, Allen key type thing, and you don't have to turn hard either to get things in place. There are only a couple screws that hold this all together as well, and they come attached to the body of the chair, so you don't have to go hunting through the packaging like I did to find where those screws might be hiding. They're right there, ready and waiting for you. So then your next step is going to be lining up the back to the base of the chair, finger tighten in. That's what I usually do as a guide, and then screw them in place with this handy dandy tightening tool. I love it. All right, now that we've kind of worked our way through this chair a little bit more, let's talk about the idea of disruption and how Metaphor kind of introduced that question in the first game. In Metaphor 1, destabilizing power structures is clearly framed as necessary. There's the whole competition for who's going to be the new king. Everything is thrown up in the air. But Metaphor 2, that assumption could be challenged. Some systems may be unjust, but stable. Others may be morally pure, but unsustainable. Letting you as the player, or Will, or whoever we play as, sit within that tension without clean answers might just be the most Metaphor sequel possible. Now, structurally, a sequel demands, I would say, like a regional approach. Each new land wouldn't just offer visual variety. It would embody a different philosophy. One nation might prioritize absolute order, sacrificing freedom for peace. Another might enforce radical transparency, creating honesty at the cost of emotional exhaustion. Another could reject hierarchy entirely, but only to struggle with instability. The key difference from the first game is that you wouldn't always be overthrowing these systems. Sometimes you'd simply pass through them, observing, participating, and deciding what beliefs you carry forward. This is where I think the developers and Atlas could really shine here. Each region becomes a thesis rather than a battlefield. Conflict emerges not from obvious villains, but from contradiction. It's such a mirror to the real world, and if you consider, regardless of what side you're on, when Metaphor ReFantazio came out, it came out at a very polarizing time in the world. And obviously, as I say that, things only get more polarizing as we go. So for a game to be a mirror into the real world, more or less, looking at different ideologies and stuff like that, it would be very interesting food for thought. And that structure also could deepen the party dynamics. In Metaphor 1, the cast is largely unified by a shared enemy. In the sequel, that unity might slowly fracture, not through betrayal, but through perspective. Everybody's got different viewpoints. Characters could respond differently to new systems based on their lived experiences. And let's just think somebody like Hulkenberg. She might gravitate towards structured societies, valuing stability over freedom. I mean, she fought for stability with her kingdom. Maybe that's what she truly values. Others might recoil from the rigid system even when they work. These disagreements wouldn't explode into dramatic confrontations. Maybe they'd linger in some of the campfire conversations, or one-on-one moments, or subtle dialogue shifts, and how characters comment on this world. And that slow ideological drift is exactly what made Metaphor's cost so compelling to me in hindsight. A sequel could finally make it the emotional centerpiece that I think it really can be. Now, before we talk on one major point of Metaphor ReFantazio, yes, I'm just going to go with that because you know what? It's funny. Let's talk about this chair and the final bit of assembly. And is it comfortable? We might get to that. We'll see. The next step is going to be securing the bottom of the chair that you sit on to the crossbar piece, and the screws are conveniently already screwed into the bottom. So like the back of the chair, just take that and screw it in place. And then once you're done with that, just stick it in place and Bob's your uncle, or whatever you want to say. And make sure you put your backrest pillow in there because us elder millennials are definitely going to need that. And of course your headrest, which is optional, but I'd recommend it just for pure comfort if you're kicking back and watching a YouTube video like this one. And mechanically, this could obviously tie into the archetype system. Instead of evolving purely through mastery, archetypes could shift based on exposure, become hybrid systems shaped by beliefs you encounter, and growth wouldn't just mean becoming stronger, it would also mean becoming changed. And that's really all I'll touch on for the battle system because, you know, it's going to be turn-based combat with archetypes. That's really all there is to say here. But I really think that this video is more about the thought process behind this game rather than like fighting. So in conclusion, Metaphor ReFantazio didn't end with answers. It ended with movement. And that's why it still feels relevant to me all this time later. In my original reflection, I said Metaphor was a game that grows with you, one that feels more meaningful the longer you sit with it. A sequel does not need to reinvent that philosophy at all. It would just need to find a way to follow it forward. So Metaphor 2 wouldn't be about saving the world, it would be about understanding it, one belief system at a time. And if Atlas could commit to this idea, they wouldn't be making a sequel. They would be building one of the most thematically ambitious JRPG series of the modern era. Let's check out the chair. Let's see how comfortable it actually is. This is like the moment of truth for me. And bear in mind, I've been sitting on like a $30 Walmart chair for months now, so let's see how it feels. But first impression, that's a lot more comfortable than when I was sitting on it, that's for sure. I think the secret sauce with this is actually the back support pillow with Gallica on it, which makes everything so much better if you're in your 30s like I am. That allows me to sit straight, which is exactly what I need, because chances are, if you're somebody my age, you tend to hunch over a lot if you're hunching over your phone or your computer doing work or something like that. I mean, I'm always looking eye level at my MacBook and then looking up at my screens, going back and forth. So having something like this will help me fix my posture, which is something I've been actively trying to do for ages now. So honestly, I think it's a great chair, and I'm really grateful for DXRacer for sending this to me. Don't forget, if you want to grab your own, you can use the code in the description below. Make sure you use the link as well. I'm really impressed for something that I was given to speak to you guys about today. And as I said before, I'm always skeptical with what I'm going to feature on here. But I think this is a perfect blend of something that actually fits the channel and something that I can actually benefit from, because my back hurts, man. So there are my thoughts on Metaphor 2 and what that could look like. I honestly think the first one was a really great game that I liked when I played it. And the more I thought about it, the more I really loved it, the ideas in the game. And just thinking about what the future can hold for a second Metaphor game is really great to think about. So I hope you guys have some great input as well. I would love to hear from you. And thank you again for DXRacing for sponsoring the video today. My back is already in so much comfort. I mean, starting the video in that chair that I was in and then ending it in this just makes my editing so much easier, and I'm looking forward to sitting in this for longer periods as well to give you guys some more great content. So thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you again on another video next week. Bye-bye.